Welcome to my session for the Microsoft Inspire in the Netherlands. I'm going to have a session on Azure for developers, and I hope you will enjoy this session and see the value of Azure for the building of applications. I'm going to talk about the world of developers, what is in there, and what's the context, then to talk about Microsoft Azure, and then I'm going to focus on why is Microsoft Azure the best choice for developers. And then also a small part to talk about how can you integrate your application into the Microsoft Cloud and ecosystems. I want to start with a phrase from Satya, our CEO. He says, well, any company is becoming a software company. That's of course not very new. So all the companies that we know are either doing something with software, their product is based on software, or they do something with their e-commerce with software. And I want to add a small thing to that, which in my opinion, software is the closest thing that we can come to magic. And for that, I want to talk about the world of developers. Typical, if you want to develop an application, some group of people has an idea. They want to make a product and they want to build something. Or there's somewhere in product manager, well, let's build this, we're going to be rich with this idea. Then you get a group of developers, and typical the idea is that these group of developers, they will wave their magic wand, and sometime automatically there will be an application there, a solution that is being created and that you can sell to the customers, and all the customers will be happy. The real world, however, is not as good as that. The developers, of course, developing their applications, but they have to have a lot of constraints that they have to take into account. One of them is time to market. Of course, the product needs to be fast and needs to be on market. There are competitors that are also building something or have better features, so there's a time to market, so you have to be fast. There's always limited money, so you cannot do all the things that you would like to do as a developer. Of course, there's always new features. You start with the ID, but new features come on. So you have to change your application and the application that you've built and the features that you have built. Then you have built your application, then there are things like privacy and security requirements you have to take into account. Typically, they are not part of the application itself, not the first ID, but of course they need to be built in, and you have to take them into account to make it safe and secure application. Then when that's all done, somebody gets the idea, let's go to geo expansion. We want to have this application all around the world or in different areas, so you have to take that into account. And then when you're ready as a developer, of course, there's the next hot thing. You build with a certain platform, a certain framework, that's what you're good at, and if something new comes up that you have to take into account because that's the new thing and you have to use that. So that makes it pretty hard for developers to make an application and indeed build that great application for the customers. So we think that with Azure we can greatly help the developers to overcome these constraints. Well, Azure, you probably have heard it already in other sessions. Azure is a big set of data centers all scattered on the globe, and now we have about 150 data centers on the globe, and they're separated in different regions. We have now 61 regions, and each region is its own region with the same legal status. So you have in one region you have multiple data centers, so you can have your data and your applications scattered across multiple data centers and still follow the same legal rules. With Azure, we think you can have a very good environment to build applications. And why is Azure the best options for developers? Well, one of the first things is that you can actually delegate your maintenance and the setup of your environments and frameworks to Azure and focus on creating your IP. Next to that, you can develop, deploy, and operate the same application, or the application in the same environment as that will be in the production environment. So you don't have to swap from one environment to another environment, which is a little bit different, and so things happen that you did not anticipate. You can choose the correct platform that you want to use. You don't have to stick to the applications and the framework that the IT department said that you had to use because that was already being already bought and that's what you have to use. You can choose as a developer what you want to use because it's already available in Azure. Then once the application is there, you can maintain and support that application in a very large integrated environment. So in the same environment where you host your application, Azure, there's a lot of tools to maintain and support that. And of course, integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. So we have the Microsoft 365 and a lot of others, and I will come to that later. So for delegation of the maintenance to Azure, this is probably a graph that you might have seen before. You have, in the old days, you had an application, you shipped it to the customer, they installed that application on their environment, on premises, and they needed to run and maintain and host the whole environment. Well, typical customers don't want it anymore. If you build an application for a customer, they say, well, nice, please give me that application as a SaaS application, software as a service, and I just I just need to have a plug in the wall, internet, and then I can use that application. Well, for the providers of that application, you have two choices, either IaaS, infrastructure as a service, or PaaS, platform as a service. And the big advantage of PaaS, which is an option within Azure, is that you can actually choose to have the services like databases, web servers, all the middleware and everything that you need that is actually maintained by Azure. You just choose, I want to have a database, you use a database, and all the management, the updates that is required to run that database is done by Azure. So that makes it very easy to delegate all the activities who do actually not benefit to the IP and the value of your application to Azure. And you don't need to bother that, and you don't need to have the experts to actually run that those services. Well, if you are going to develop on Azure, then a lot of tools that you can use. Of course, the Visual Studio and all the environments. If you actually work in the ecosystem of Microsoft, but you can also use environments for Java, Node, Python. All these environments are available on Azure. And I want to pick 3 services what I think is interesting for now. One of them is the app configuration. Typical, if you have an application which runs on multiple systems, for instance, in multiple data centers, there's a lot of effort that developers need to take into having the right configuration. Might also be in the environments, go from development to production. App configuration is one tool that makes it very easy to do the configuration in a very managed way. Another thing is the Azure Dev Labs. Typical for developers, it's hard to set up a dev environment with all the right tools, the right environment, the right version of all the SDKs. Azure Dev Labs makes it possible to create a template. You can create a dev environment for a developer, and they have all the right tools just being set up for them. Makes it very easier for a developer to get on board. Then we have logic apps. If you want to go to a no-code environment, build integration software without having to write actually software, a logic app is a very good way to develop that kind of IP. Of course, DevOps. If you are a developer, you need to have DevOps. 2 things that I want to highlight: the Azure pipelines and the GitHub Actions for Azure, to have a streamlined DevOps environment to go from development, to go to test, to go to exception and production if you want to do that in a very automated way. So you can ship features every day, maybe even more than once per day. So you can automate the whole development and testing with the toolings which just live in Azure themselves. Then, of course, next to the development of application, you need to choose what is the best compute environment for your solution. Well, typical if you have a web application, or you have an AKS or a Kubernetes environment, Azure delivers all the different compute environments, and you can just choose the ones which is best for your solution. So if you, for instance, need to have a web environment, APIs, or other applications, you can use app services. App services provide all the services for you to have a very scalable and secure web service that you can just use. And it can run all the environments, .NET, Node, Python, Java, and you can just use that service, and that's where you run your application on. If you want to go serverless, you just want to run a function and you want to run it X amount of times per day or once per month, you can use Azure Functions. It's our serverless solution, and you just pay by use. If you run your function once, you pay once. If you run your function 10,000 times per second, you pay for that, and we scale automatically for you. If you want to use microservices on Kubernetes, that's a very good way to build your application, but it's very hard to maintain your Kubernetes cluster. So we deliver AKS, which is an Azure Kubernetes service, and it's a managed cluster that we manage for you, and you only have to worry about the containers that you actually ship to that and how you actually manage the environment. But all the support and upgrades of the cluster is done by us. And last but not least, if you also want just the old-fashioned batch work, you need to do a lot of work a lot of times, so you just need to have a batch, and you need to do the batch once per month, for instance, so you need a lot of compute powers in a very short moment. Then we have, for instance, Azure Batch, where you can just spin up a lot of VMs and a lot of compute power to do that batch on that moment, and then when you're ready, you actually shut down. Of course, if you have compute, you also have data for your application, and on Azure we have most of the popular databases which you can use on Azure. And the interesting thing is that you can use them in a way that we manage the store for you, the database, and you can just order databases on that version. So for instance, Cosmos, if you want to have a NoSQL or a graph database, you can have Azure SQL database, just the Microsoft version, which is managed by us. You can have it in different flavors, just one database. You can have it in a pool or in hyperscale, and you have all the options there. And an interesting one is also we have the Azure SQL Edge. So if you want to run your SQL database not in Azure, but on the edge, for instance in a car or on a ship or somewhere else on a device, you can use Azure SQL Edge, and we manage that SQL for you, and it's being updated and managed by us on that device. Of course, there are a lot of other flavors, but I think this was interesting to highlight. Then if you have your application, it's done, it's running, then you need to maintain and support that application. On Azure, we provide a lot of ways how you can maintain and support your application, and for instance, get insight into what is the behavior of that application. So what's the application doing? Well, the most important service we have is Application Insight. You get all the data from the compute for your databases, so all the memory and CPU kind of information, but also all the information from the application, what is talking to what, how many times, what are the errors. It can actually drill down from us and even replay those actions if you want to. We have also the other services, which is very interesting. For instance, the Azure managed applications. So if you have a customer who also has Azure and you want to run your application in their Azure environment, you can use Azure managed applications, and then your application runs in the environment of the customer, but you are the one that can actually maintain and support that application. That's a very, very powerful way of doing that. Then we also have automation. Of course, you want to do a lot of automated tasks, for instance, migration of tasks, or you want to split workload, or you want to scale up or scale down on certain moments, on certain loads. That kind of automation can be done using Azure Automation. And then, of course, we also have the integration into the Microsoft ecosystem. If you have your application, but you want to run it as part of the Microsoft ecosystem and actually make use of the value of that, we have a lot of points where you can do the integration. One is, of course, the Azure AD identity. or everybody with an Office 365 account, you can use it in your application and make value of that and have a single sign-on experience for your user into your application. You can use all the Microsoft 365 data using the graph. Get everything from users to mail to calendars to all the information which is available, and you can actually use that within your application. Then integrate into Teams and Office and actually make use of the very high usage of those applications by your end users. Make the data actionable, have a lot of data, make it actionable and visible, and in Power BI, that gives a lot of value to your application. And of course, and last, to make your application part of the Power Apps platform, where either you create a Power App or you make it possible that Power Apps can integrate with your applications by using custom connectors. With that, I think there's a lot of value for developers for using Azure, make it a lot easier to build your application, overcome the constraints that I mentioned. And if you want to learn more, there's a number of topics that I would like to highlight. First one is the Architecture Center. That's where all the documentation and all the things and all the products are being documented with samples and everything that you know to get more insight. Then of course, Microsoft Learn, if you want to learn all our stuff. Go to the Cloud Enablement Desk if you want to migrate and get help on migrating your application to Azure. And of course, the Partner Center if you want to be or are a Microsoft partner and want to use our co-sell and co-build motion to get your application into the market. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope that I showed that Azure is a very good place for developers.